Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories is one of, if not the most infamous video games based on the popular Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. As I've reviewed before, its brutality and randomness and high-level difficulty is alluring for many. It followed a different yet familiar playstyle that one might expect given the decades of card game simulators the series has provided. With a clear hierarchy of cards, a perplexing alignment system, and a critical cycling mechanic, Forbidden Memories has withstood the test of time for the masochist duelist. But where did it all start? How did the game come to be? And why were the memories of production forbidden? The game was originally released in Japan on the PlayStation on December 9th, 1999. Now, I don't know if you know much about game development, but it can take a long time. A 2D game could be developed within several months between conceptualization, pre-production, production, testing, and the launch itself. However, a 3D game could take multiple years given the increased complexity for modeling and gameplay alone. For example, Final Fantasy VII, released in 1997, started development in 1994. FF7 is obviously a larger scope than Forbidden Memories, or FMR for short. But generally speaking, development of 3D games around the mid to late 90s would hover around a year or two. Needless to say, FMR did not start in the summer of 99. Within the game's code is the date for January 1998, confirming the start of production. This was during the first half of the Duelist Kingdom arc of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, in which the series starts to focus on the fictional card game. So FMR was being made as Takahashi himself was creating cards and feeding ideas to the dev team. In my previous Magic and Wizards history video, I discussed how the OCG was in development at the same time as the Bandai game, and FMR is further evidence of this, a large push for the series. But because the game was being made at the same time as Takahashi and Konami ironing out a rule set, certain elements in the final game became different from the OCG, such as the lack of attributes. All was not smooth in development. During an interview with the director in a 1999 Konami yearbook, we got some insight into the Turmoil. For starters, a lot of cards were added between the Duel Monsters and Duel Monsters 2 Game Boy games, which affected the scope of FMR deep into development. Secondly, the quality range of the models was also an issue, a problem that was never quite fixed. Thirdly, they received a late directive from Sony themselves that the team had to cover up their female monsters more, which obviously takes precious time. Towards the end of production, the Konami development team actually ran out of programmers due to their small budget and increasing dev time, so the director had to do a lot himself. You can see this in the game, where the endgame code that was meant for Slate Warrior doesn't even work, something that matches the card in the Duelist of the Roses, aka True Duel Monsters 2, the sequel to FMR. On top of the changes in early 1999 to change everything across the board from Magic and Wizards to the final Duel Monsters brand. It's visible in-game that the Tokyo Dome tournament was supposed to be a tie-in event that took place in August 99. While the tournament happened for the most part, all the delays pushed the game back to the next favorable holiday season release. The demo disc released in January 2000 is another example of these delays. It's possible that FMR was done by the end of 1998, but between DM2, Magic and Wizards, female monsters, release schedules, and coding otherwise, an entire year was added upon the game. And if you're enjoying this video and want to support the Janjo Zone more than just liking and subscribing, make sure to join my Patreon as a great way to ensure the longevity of the Janjo Zone. More woes would arise, such as game balancing, since no one could predict a player's deck. Thus, the game difficulty was ramped up to prepare players, potentially creating a busted deck with some sort of trading exploit or with the Japanese exclusive Pocket Station. Also most likely why the password system has such a hefty star chip requirement for most cards, and why decks had a size limit. They wanted kids to trade, but still had to maintain card addiction and game balancing. Having a higher prioritization on the card's collectability over gameplay certainly didn't help make the game any less tough, for any strong card equivalized to being rare. Due to this, any card worthwhile was a valley in strength compared to weaker cards. So you either had to obtain said rare card or master the game's unique mechanics like alignments and fusion. Their mindset was that a game was more fun by ways of game knowledge rather than physical skill. All of this is why the game is as brutal as people know it for. The quirks also bled into the gameplay, as aside from the inventive rule set, the game was an early go at the ritual mechanic. I've discussed the history of rituals before, but FMR was a clear example of Takahashi feeding ideas to the team that he himself was going to implement. Rituals wouldn't debut in the manga until February 99, showing that Takahashi had his ideas way in advance. Guess it helps that both Digimon and Pokemon with their evolving mechanics were all the rage in 97 and 98 respectively. Even the art for Blue Eyes White Dragon changing was a sign of undecided elements. We know that Takahashi makes a lot of card designs before settling on a card's art. Just so happens that Blue Eyes could have had its alt art as its primary art at one point, as opposed to sticking to the manga's art. Perhaps it was an idea to differentiate themselves from the Bandai game, like with Dark Magician. Upon its eventual release, FMR contained 5 promo cards, alongside a game guide that contained 1 more card. Had the game been released in August 99, the ramifications to the OCG would have been interesting. During the Tokyo Dome era, this would have been up to Volume 4. In Ultimate Offering regions, Metal Zoa would be a solid option for those who weren't able to obtain Blue Eyes or Great Moth, or even as a side deck tech in preparation for a sided Dragon Capture Jar. Heck, you could even play a full-on metal deck if you're feeling particularly spicy at your locals. Post-Tokyo Dome in the Booster 4 meta, Revival Good Stuff could make use out of the metal monsters if so choose, since this was before the Revival rule was put out into the ether. Aggro would have gained more options simply thanks to Metal Morph being a third attack buff trap. And with the release of Premium Pack, you could now play Magician of Black Chaos way earlier than the Ritual Magic's OCG release in December 99. Thus, the ritual option was significantly stronger than your previous single option in Dokuro Rider. Yikes, yeah, I'll take that improvement. And I suppose Harpy's Pet Dragon was around too for those fans of the archetype. I'm unsure when they originally wanted the game to release, if based on their finished 98 build, if it was way early during the official rules era, but that's just more speculation, and I'll just leave that to you in the comments to talk about. Upon its eventual release, FMR would rank the 3rd best-selling game in Japan that week, trailing only behind Pokemon Gold and Silver and the new Gran Turismo 2. The 3D Yu-Gi-Oh game would go on to sell almost 500,000 copies by the end of 2000. By that point, it would receive a best of release earlier in November, let alone all the eventual sales come its US release in March 2002, pushing it past the 2 million sales mark, leaving its original legacy as the 29th best-selling PlayStation 1 game of all time. Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories is more than just RNG hell. It's a testament to the development team at Konami for trying to make a console game based on a game that had yet to be truly defined, through thick and thin, to ensure that the product they put out was one based on a vision of card collecting as a hobby and not a dueling simulator as we may expect decades later. Despite seemingly absurd gameplay, there was a method to the madness, and madness was probably how the dev team felt by the end, or at least whoever was left. So you can rest easy. You weren't the only one suffering. Duel on, passionate duelist.